Hello friends, have you ever wondered what sparked one of the deadliest conflicts in human history? World War I, often called the Great War, changed the world forever. But what caused this global catastrophe? Today, we are diving deep into the complex wave of events that led to World War I. Let's start with the big picture. Europe in early 20th century. It was a time of great change, with empires fight for power and influence. The continent was like a power drum, just waiting for a spark to set it off. First off, we have nationalism. Countries were madly proud of their identity and wanted to claim their dominance. This led to a lot of tension, especially in regions with a mixed ethnic population. For example, the Balkans were a hub of nationalist sentiment. Next, let's talk about imperial race. European powers were in a race to build vast colonial empires. They wanted resources, land, and political influence around the globe. This competition often led to conflict and the bitterness between nations. Germany, a relatively new country, felt left out of this imperial game. They wanted their place in the sun, as Kaiser William II put it. Now, onto a military command. Countries were building up their armed forces at an alarming rate. It was like an arms race, with each nation trying to outdo the others. Germany and Britain were particularly competitive in naval expansion. This build-up created an atmosphere of fear. Everyone thought their neighbors were preparing for war. Let's not forget about alliances system. Europe was divided into two main camps. On one side, we have triple alliance like Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy. On others, again a triple alliance, Britain, France and Russia. The alliances were meant to maintain balance and prevent war. Ironically, they ended up doing the opposite. Now, let's zoom in on a specific event, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand on June 28, 1914. The successor to the Austro-Hungarian throne was shot dead in Bosnia. The assassin was a Bosnian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. This event is often called the immediate trigger for World War I. But why this assassination led to global conflict? It all comes down to those alliances we talked about earlier. Austro-Hungarian blamed Serbia for the assassination and they declared the war. Russia allied with Serbia, mobilized its forces to defend its friends. Germany, supporting Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia and France. Britain, tied to France and Russia, was pulled into the conflict. It was like a chain reaction, with one country after another joining the fight. Let's take a moment to consider the role of public opinion. Many people in Europe welcomed the war at first. There was a sense of excitement and patriotism in the air. Few realized the horror and the devastation that lay ahead. Economic factors also play a part in the lead-up to the war. Industrial growth had created new economic powerhouses. Countries were competing for markets and the resources. This economic rivalry added to the existing tensions. We should also mention the influence of social evolution. This idea applied Darwin's theory of evolution to the human societies. Some leaders believe that war was a natural way to prove national superiority. This dangerous thinking made war seems inevitable and even desirable. Now, let's consider the role of technology. New weapons and the military innovation were changing the nature of the warfare. Machine guns, tanks, and the chemical weapons would soon make their deadly debut. Yet, many military leaders were still stuck in old-fashioned thinking. They didn't realize how these new technologies would change the face of battle. It's important to note that no single factor caused World War I. It was a perfect storm of the different elements coming together. Now, let's talk about long-term tension combined with the short-term events to create a global crisis. Let's take a moment to reflect on the human cost of these causes. Millions of people would lose their lives in the coming conflict or coming years. Entire generation would be scared by the horrors of a modern warfare. The world map would be redrawn and the old empires would crumble. Now, let's talk about harsh reality of strange warfare. It's 1916, and if you are a young soldier on the Western Front, this is your strange, and it's where you will eat, sleep, and fight. The first thing that hit you is the smell. It's a mix of mud, rotting food, and the human waste. The bad smell is overwhelming, and it never goes away. This offers some protection from enemy fire, but they are far from perfect. Your daily routine starts early, usually before daybreak. You are woken up for a stand to, where everyone prepares for a possible enemy attack. During the war, there is always work to be done. You might be preparing a damaged section of the trench, or you could be on watch duty, watching for any sign of enemy's movement. Mealtime are very fresh, but don't expect much. Your food often consists of beef, hard biscuits, and tea. If you are lucky, you might get some jams or cheese. Water is limited and often contaminated. Many soldiers suffer from dysentery and other illnesses. As the night falls, the real dangers begin. This is when most raids and the attacks happens. You stand guard, watching in the darkness. The constant fear of enemy assaults keep you on edge. Your bed is usually just a wooden board or muddy ground. Rats around feeding on whatever they can find. Speaking of mud, is everywhere. When it rains, the trenches turn into mud. The constant stress and the trauma leave lasting scars. Friendship formed in the trenches are intense and often short-lived. You rely on your fellow soldiers for survivals, but many don't make it home. The trenches become a powerful symbol of the war. Now, let's explore some of the major battles that define this conflict. First up is the Battle of Marne in 1914. This battle took place near Paris, France. In the war's early stage, the German army was advancing rapidly, threatening to capture the French capital. In a desperate move, French and the British forces counterattacked. They used taxis to support or transport troops to the front, earning it the nickname the Miracle of the Marne. This battle halted the German advance and set the stage for strange warfare. Next, we have Battle of Verdun in 1916. This was one of the longest and the bloodiest battle in the human history. It lasted for 300 days and resulted over 700,000 casualties. The German army attacked the French city of Verdun. Their goal was to bleed France white by forcing them to defeat or defend their symbolic location. Despite heavy losses, the French held on, declaring they shall not pass. Verdun became the symbol of French determination and the sacrifice. Now let's talk about the Battle of Somme, also in 1916. This Anglo-French offensive was meant to relieve pressure on Verdun. It began with a week-long artillery bombardment of German lines. On 1st July, British troops went over the top to attack. The first day alone, Britain suffered 60,000 casualties. The battle dragged on for a month, gaining little ground at the terrible cost. By the end, over millions of men were killed or wounded. In 1917, we have the Battle of Pas-Chain-d'Alais, also known as the Third Battle of Ypres. This battle took place in the Belgium and is remembered for its horrific conditions. Heavy rains turned the battlefield into the muddy. Men and the horses drowned in the mud, and many bodies were never recovered. The battle lasted for 3 months and gained only a few miles of territory. It's often seen as the example of war futility and the human cost. Let's shift our focus on Eastern Front and the Brusilov offensive of 1916. This was Russia's greatest contribution to the Allied war efforts. General Alexei Brusilov led a massive attack against Austro-Hungarian forces. The offensive was initially very successful, pushing the enemy back. However, Russia losses high and they couldn't sustain the advance. This battle weakened both Russia and Austria-Hungary significantly. Back on the Western Front, we have the Second Battle of Marne in 1918. This was Germany's last major offensive of the war. They hoped to win before American troops arrived in large numbers. However, the Allies, now including American troops, successfully counterattacked. This battle marked the turning point on Western Front. From this point on, the Allies would be on the offensive until the war's end. Finally, let's look at the 100 Days Offensive in late 1918. This was a series of Allied attacks on push the German back. It began with the Battle of Amiens, where tanks were used effectively. The German army was exhausted and demoralized after years of fighting. Allied forces broke through the line Hindenburg. This offensive led directly to the Peace of November 11, 1918, ending the war. These battles show the scale and the brutality of World War I. Millions of people were lost and the map of Europe was redrawn. The war's outcome set the stage for future conflicts, including World War II. It's crucial to remember these events and learn from the history. Now, let's talk about the technology shaped the course of World War I. It's a fascinating topic that often gets overlooked. Let's start by setting the scene. It's 1914 and Europe is on the brink of war. The Industrial Revolution has been in a full swing for decades. New technologies are emerging at a rapid pace, but No one could have predicted how this innovation would transform the battlefield. First up, let's talk about the machine gun. This weapon had been around since the late 19th century, but it reached new level of effectiveness during World War I. The machine gun could fire hundreds of rounds per minute. Now, let's move on to the game-changing invention, the tank. The British introduced a tank in 1916 at the battlefield of Somme. This armed vehicle could cross trenches. They offer protection for troops and the firepower on the move. Early tanks were shown the unreliable, but they covered the way for modern armed warfare. In the skies, aviation technology was advancing rapidly. Communication technology played a crucial role in World War I. The telephone allowed for a rapid communication between commanders and the troops. Radio became increasingly important, especially for coordinating naval and the air operations. But these new technologies were weak to interception. This led to advance in the encryption and the code breaking. Chemical weapons were one of the war's most horrific innovation. Chlorine gas was first used by the Germans at Ypres in 1915. Later, even deadlier gases like phosgene and mustard gas were developed. These weapons caused immense suffering and led to the development of gas masks. Medical technology also advanced during the war. New technologies for treating wounds and preventing infection were developed. The use of X-ray helped doctors to locate the bullet. Blood transfusion became more common, saving the countless lives. Transportation saw a significant improvement during the World War I. Railways were crucial for moving troops and the supplies. Motor vehicles, including trucks and the ambulance, became the more common. This increased mobility would have a lasting impact on warfare. Now, let's talk about the impact of World War I on the home front. This just isn't about soldiers and the trenches. It's about how everyday life changed for those left behind. The war had a profound impact on the home front in the many countries. Let's start with the economy. As men left for war, women stepped into the traditional male role. They worked in the factories, offices, and the farms. This shift changed the dynamics of warfare. It also changed the long-held belief about gender role. In the United States, women participated in the workforce increased by 6.3% during the war. In Britain, the number of women working in the industry rose by 1.5 million. This change wasn't just about numbers. It represents the significant shift in the societal norms. The war also led to government intervention in the economy. Many countries implemented rationing system. People had to adapt to limited access to food, fuel, and other essentials. In Britain, sugar was the first attempt to be rationed in the 1970s. By 1918, meat, butter, cheese, and the margarine were also rationed. The war effort required massive industrial production. Factories shifted from producing consumer goods to military supplies. This change affected the availability of everyday items. People had to learn to make it do with the less. They grew their food in victory gardens. They repurposed and they recycled materials. The war also had a significant impact on public health. The Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 and the 1919 claimed millions of lives worldwide. The movement of troops likely contributed to the spread of virus. Education was another area affected by the war. Many schools face teacher shortages as educators join the military. Some schools close or operate with the reduced hours. Children often had to take a more responsibility at home. This situation led to concern about long-term effect on education. The war also influenced culture and the entertainment. Propaganda became a powerful tool for governments. They use posters, films, and the music to boost morals of support or moral and the support for the war. Charlie Chaplin films Shoulder Arms in 1918 use humor to address wartime experiences. Popular music reflects the mood of the time. Songs like Over There by George Cohan support for the war efforts. The conflict also changed how people receive news. Newspaper providers regularly update from the front lines. This constant flow of information kept the war at the people's mind. It also raises questions about censorship and the reliability of news sources. The war had a profound technological impact on society. Families lived with the constant worry about loved ones fighting abroad. Communities come together to support each other during difficult time. Government introduced new taxes and they sold war bonds to fund the conflict. This financial burden would have a long-lasting effect on national economies. In India, participation in the war strengthened the call for independence from British rule. Similar sentiment grew in other colonies also. The war end in the 1918 didn't mean an immediate return to the normal. The Spanish flu pandemic continued to claim lives. Yet, the war also sparked positive changes. Women's contribution during the war in 1920s, the United States passed the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. Similar progress occurred in other countries as well. Now, let's discuss the Treaty of Versailles and its far-reaching consequences. This isn't just an old paper. It's the agreement that ended World War I and set the stage for global tension. The treaty they are about to draft will have consequences that echo through history. First up, let's look at the key players. We have Georges Clement, the French Prime Minister, nicknamed the Tiger. Then there is a British Prime Minister, David George, trying to balance punishment. And don't forget US President Woodrow Wilson, idealistic and hoping for lasting peace. On other side, we have the defeated Germans, who are not even invited to the negotiation. Now, what exactly did this treaty did or do? Well, it's laid out some pretty harsh items or terms for Germany. First and foremost, Germany had to accept full responsibility for starting the war. This was known as the War Guilt Clause, and it didn't go down well with the German people. The treaty also imposed massive payment on Germany. We are talking about millions of dollars in today's money. This financial burden was meant to cripple Germany's economy and prevent it from becoming a threat again. But that's not all. Germany was forced to give up significant territories. Alsace-Lorraine went back to France. Part of Eastern Germany were given to the newly formed Poland or reformed Poland, and Germany lost all its overseas colonies. The German military was also severely restricted. The army was limited just 100,000 men, no tanks, no air forces, and only a tiny navy were allowed. The goal was to make sure Germany couldn't start another war. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that seems pretty harsh, and you would be right. Many people at the time, including some Allied leaders, worried that these terms were too severe. So, what were the consequences of this treaty? Well, in Germany, it led to deep sense of the treatment and the humiliation, or the resentment and the humiliation. Many Germans felt they had been unfairly punished, especially since they were not allowed to participate in the negotiation process. This resentment created a fertile ground for extremist political movement. One of these was the Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler. Hitler used this anger over the treaty to gain support and eventually come to power. The economic consequences were also severe. Germans struggled to pay the massive payment. This led to hyperinflation in the 1920s, where money became almost worthless. Imagine need too full of cash to just buy a loaf of bread. But the effect were not limited to Germany. The treaty redraw the map of Europe, creating new countries and the shifting borders. This led to ongoing conflict and the tension in many regions. Well, many historians argue that the harsh term of the Treaty of Versailles play a significant role in setting the stage for World War II. It's important to note that not everyone agrees on a treaty's impact. Some argue that it wasn't harsh enough to prevent Germany from rebuilding its military power. Others say that the real problem was not a treaty itself, but how it was reinforced. Let's fast forward a bit to see the long-term effects. After World War II, world leaders seems to have learned from the mistakes of the Versailles. The treatment of defeated Germany after 1945 was quite different. Instead of punishment, the focus was to rebuilding and the integration into the international community. This approach led to formation of European Union. So, what we can learn from all this? Now, let's discuss the propaganda during the World War I. First up, let's talk about posters. These were everywhere during the War I. Imagine walking down your street and seeing huge colorful image urging you to join the army. The caption, "Your country needs you." Poster always encouraged people to buy war bonds. Now, let's move on to the newspaper. These were social media of their time. Governments quickly realized they needed to control the narrative. In Britain, newspaper editor met daily with the government to decide what news to print, painting the enemy in a bad light. Let's talk about how each side portrayed their opponent. The Allies often depicted German as a barbaric. Meanwhile, German propaganda portrayed the Allies as a greedy. They even used Americans' diverse population against it. But it wasn't all about making the enemy look bad. Propaganda also focused on boosting morale at home. Songs and the poems celebrates the bravery of soldiers. Now, here is where things get really interesting. The use of new technology. World War I saw the birth of film as a propaganda tool. These films were a powerful way to bring the front line to the home front, but they were heavily censored. Let's not forget about censorship. It was a huge part of controlling information. Letters from soldiers were heavily censored, but propaganda wasn't just aimed at their own citizens. countries also tried to influence neutral nations. The United States, before joining the war, was a major target. The British were particularly effective at this, playing on culture ties and the sharing language. Now, let's talk some specific campaigns. In Britain, there was a famous Daddy, what did you do in the Great War? The posters, it show a future scene of a man being questioned by his children about his war contribution. Now, let's discuss the global impact of World War I. This isn't just a story of battle and the trenches. It's a tale of how one war changed everything, from borders to belief, from a technology to society. Let's start with the political landscape. World War I redraw the map of Europe and beyond. The mighty Austro-Hungarian Empire gone. The Ottoman Empire dissolved. The German Empire transformed into the Republic. New nations emerged from the ashes of this fallen empire. Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, all born in the after of war. The Middle East completely reshaped. The British and the French cut the region, creating new countries like Iraq and the Syria. These artificial borders would lead to a conflict that continuation to the day, or continue to till death or till day. But the changes were not just on map. World War I shook up the very foundation of society. Before war, many believed in an inevitability of human progress. This optimism was shattered by the brutality of modern warfare. Literature, art, music reflects this new, darker worldview. Women's role in the society underwent a massive shift. With the men at front, women stepped into a traditional male job. They wanted in a factories, or women work in the factories, drove buses, and even join the military in the support system. In Britain and even in the United States, women finally won the right to vote. The economic impact of World War I was staggering. Europe, once the center of the world economy, was left behind. The United States emerged as the new economic superpower. Germany, burdened by war effect, faced economic collapse. Radio technology, crucial for military communication, started as a broadcasting industry. Medical advances, born from necessity, saved a countless life during the and after the war. Plastic surgeries technologies were developed to treat facial injuries. Blood banks were established, a practice that continues to save lives today. The war also had profound effect on public health. World War I changed the nature of warfare itself. The war's after effect saw birth of new political ideologies. Colonial empires began to crack, like a British in India and the Spanish in the Latin America. In Africa, over 2 million people served as soldiers or labor. This experience changed their view on the colonial rule. In India, contribution to the war efforts strengthened call for independence. Even in neutral countries like Argentina, the war disrupted trade. The cultural impact of World War I was equally profound. The lost generation of writers and the artists emerged. They questioned old values. Jazz music, brought to Europe by American soldiers, spread across the continent. It became the soundtrack of the power or post-war era. The role of science in a society changed dramatically. The war shone both the creative and the destructive potential of scientific advance. This led to increase government funding for scientific research. It also sparked ethnical debates about the use of science that continue today. World War I even changed how we remember. The concept of unknown soldiers was born. The war's end saw a brief period of economic boom, but the foundation were shaky. The Great Depression would follow, partially due to the war's long-term economic effects. The collective trauma of the war influenced everything, from parenting style to popular entertainment. Now, let's discuss some of the world's most powerful empires. The war started due to the complex wave of alliances and the tensions. Let's look at some of the major empires involved first. The Austro-Hungarian Empire. The empire had existed for centuries and was a major power in the Central Europe. It was a diverse empire. This diversity, however, also led to internal tension. The war put immense pressure on the empire. By the end of war, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had completely collapsed. It split into the several independent nations, including Australia, Hungary, Czech, Slovakia. Next, let's consider the Ottoman Empire, often called the sick man of Europe. The Ottoman Empire had been a decline for years. World War I dealt the final blow to this once mighty empire. The Ottoman alliance with Germany, hoping to regain lost territory. Instead, they faced defeat on multiple fronts. The empire lost vast territories in the Middle East and North Africa. After the war, Ottoman Empire was dismantled. Turkey emerged as a new republic, while other regions became separate nations. The Russian Empire also underwent a dramatic transformation during the war. Initially, part of Allies, Russia faced a severe military setback. Food shortage and the economic problems became major issues. The British Empire, while on the winning side, was deeply affected by the war. The conflict burdens the Britain resources and the manpower. It accelerated call for independence in various British colonies like India. This set the stage for gradual dismantling of the British Empire. Germany lost territories and faced harsh repression. This condition would later contribute to the rise of Nazi Germany. The war didn't just reshape Europe, its effects were felt around the world. In the Middle East, the collapse of Ottoman Empire led to new nation states. In Africa, Germany colonies were divided amongst the victorious power. The war also marked the rise of United States as a global power. Some of these conflicts continue to this day. The war impact on global economy was immense. The United States became the world's creditor nation. Europe, once the center of global finance, was now deeply in debt. World War I truly was a turning point in a world's history. It marked the end of the old order, and the birth of modern world. The collapse of empire reshaped the global map. So friends, this is all about World War I. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more historical deep dives. Thank you for watching, and remember, understanding history helps us to navigate the present and shape the future.